Change from the inside. Lawyer and lobbyist with Public Citizen, a nonprofit consumer advocacy group founded by Ralph Nader. She has lobbied for reforms in campaign finance and sees the president's dinner as an example of abuse in the current system. Ms. Edwards joins us from our Washington studios. Also with us here in Washington is Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. The senator has led Republican calls for finance reform, but says there's nothing wrong with the dinner tonight as long as the donations were voluntary. You were at the dinner tonight, Senator.
Yes, I was. It was extremely successful in spite of its press.
Forgive a somewhat impertinent question or an impertinent observation. I mean, you're a very charming man, but I'm not sure I'd want to spend $30,000 for the privilege of having dinner with you.
Well, 14,000 people participated in this event tonight. Over 300,000 have participated in giving to the Republican Senatorial Committee this year. Our average contribution is $54 a person.
Not at that dinner.
Not at the dinner. The dinner's average was a good deal higher because this was targeted for higher donors. But if you take the overall fundraising effort of Republicans, the average donor is remarkably low. This year, 314,000 contributors for an average of $54 each. That's not exactly big bucks, Ted.
Paul Tsongas commented on Larry King's show this evening that your dinner tonight, I'm going to make it your dinner just for the sake of this broadcast, your dinner tonight raised more money for the Republican Party than he, Paul Tsongas, was able to raise in his entire presidential campaign. Now, that either means that he's a lousy fundraiser, you're great fundraisers, or that maybe something's a little bit askew here.
Well, what you don't see, Ted, is what we call the non-party soft money. The Democrats benefit mightily from 501c tax-exempt organizations such as labor unions that contribute vast amounts to their campaigns, which never show up on anybody's campaign finance report. So you get a kind of distorted view. Republican donations, by and large, are what we call hard money. That is, they're disclosed, they're limited, and they're on the reports so that reporters can actually see what's being spent in a typical Republican campaign. So you get a bit of a distorted view because we disclose everything.
Ms. Edwards, in a sense, it occurs to me that if you really want equity across the board, then you would preclude any large donations, but instead of just putting every taxpayer down for, you know, $1 and a box they can check off, put them down for $50, raise enough money that it is distributed among all major candidates who meet a certain standard, and don't allow any kind of contribution. What would you think about that?
Well, in fact, public financing is exactly what's needed to clean up the campaign finance system. Public financing would inject a measure of clean resources, good government money behind congressional candidates. Under the current scheme, this is an incumbent protection plan where incumbents raise enormous amounts of money and challengers can't even begin to meet the competition.
I rather suspect, I mean, even as I was making that proposal, I could almost hear people around the country shrieking, some of them, at the notion that they would be obliged to check off that box or that they would be obliged to pay $50. I mean, some people really don't want to have anything to do with it. And doesn't it make sense to you that those people who are going to make donations, and let's for the sake of argument say that their names are going to be revealed, that they expect something in return? What's wrong with it?
Well, in fact, already under a public financing scheme in the presidential system, 32 million Americans do check off and do use the presidential checkoff system. The current scheme that we have now, in which huge donors, $100,000 plus donors, can contribute to the political process, like contributions made in this dinner, are poisoning the system. People who purchase tickets to this dinner curry access and favors. They buy access to the presidency, to the White House, and to members of Congress. They get ambassadorships. They receive regulatory favors and other kinds of influence that normal constituents simply don't have. We've lost touch here.
Ted, may I make an observation about
Yes, please.
this? Yeah, it's not possible for an individual to give $100,000, and Ms. Edwards knows that. This money tonight at this dinner came from 14,000 people. There were those who solicited a lot of that. But it gets down to the fundamental question of whether you want campaigns to be publicly funded by the taxpayers or by people who voluntarily contribute. And it's in that area that Citizen Access and I have a public citizen, whatever the group is, have a basic disagreement. I don't think American taxpayers want to fund campaigns. As a matter of fact, they vote every April 15th on their tax returns, and the number of people participating in checking off a dollar for the presidential system, which is the one race we do have publicly funded, has dropped from 29% in 1976 down to a mere 19%, and dropping further because people, in the one time they have a chance to vote on the issue of public funding, are increasingly voting no.
Ms. Edwards, I know you want to respond. Hold off your response for just a moment, if you would. We'll continue our discussion in a moment. Before the break, you wanted to make an observation.
Yes, I did. Senator McConnell is wrong. In fact, of the voters who check off using the presidential checkoff system, contributing to public funding of presidential campaigns, more than half of those voters in 1990 contributed in the presidential checkoff system. That is 32 million Americans who exercised the right to check off $1 to contribute to public financing. And this can work in congressional campaigns as well, especially when combined with spending limits.
You were talking a few moments ago about this being sort of a fund for the incumbents, right?
The current scheme is an incumbent protection scheme. Incumbents are reelected at a 97% reelection rate in this country, and challengers don't even stand the chance to challenge and to face competition in elections in this country.
So theoretically, that would work to the advantage of the president, for example, but in the House, by contrast, it would be to the advantage of the Democrats.
Well, no, in fact, because the legislation, in fact, that's proposed to impose spending limits and public financing in the congressional races would support challengers, would put challengers on a level playing field. The current scheme that's in existence now, in fact, doesn't support challengers and forces incumbents to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in the case of Senate races, $6 million just to run a Senate race.
Isn't there, Senator, a better way of doing it than is being done right now? Because I must say, in a sense, we seem to have the worst of both worlds now.
Yeah, there is a better way to do it. First of all, we need to get rid of political action committees. And we need to do something about non-party soft money, sewer money, organizations such as the one that Ms. Edwards works for, that go around hiding behind the tax code, attacking candidates, and you never see anything disclosed. Clearly, the issue of spending limits, all the experts, all the academic experts agree that spending limits benefit the incumbents. So we don't want to do that. We have too many incumbents getting elected as it is.
Excuse me, Senator McConnell, you are absolutely wrong in this instance. First of all, a ban on political action committees, as you know, would be blatantly unconstitutional.
Well, what's blatantly
infringement
unconstitutional,
against
Ms. Edwards,
free
is this
speech.
bill, which does not contain voluntary spending limits. As a matter of fact, Ted, the Supreme Court in Buckley against Vallejo said that spending is speech, and you can't dole it out in equal amounts.
Senator
This bill
McConnell, excuse me, Senator, the president has operated under a system of spending limits and public financing since post-Watergate. And Congress can do exactly the same thing.
That's like saying because the House has a bank, the Senate ought to have a bank.
Oh, that's absolutely not true. This is about clean campaigns.
Simply because the presidential election has been unfortunately funded with millions of dollars of taxpayers' money for 15 years is not an argument for extending it to 535 additional races. The FEC would soon be the size of the Veterans Administration,
excuse me, right now,
auditors crawling all over citizens everywhere. We'd be funding fringe candidates.
Folks, may I jump in here just for a moment? If only to ask you to sort of show a little courtesy to one another.
Okay.
And Ms. Edwards, if you'd be good enough to finish your point, and then Senator, you'll be able to respond.
Senator McConnell, right now, taxpayers pay the cost in bailouts, tax loopholes, regulatory favors, and Charles Keating is a perfect example of $2 billion at taxpayer cost for special interest legislation, $500 billion bailout of the savings and loan industries. We simply cannot afford in this country anymore to continue to pay the cost of special interest legislation when we could pay the meager cost of publicly funding congressional campaigns and
Ms.
imposing
Edwards,
spending limits.
let me jump in because we're down to our last 35, 40 seconds. Senator, you get the last word.
Well, this bill would be food stamps for politicians. You'd have a massive new federal entitlement program funding not only Republicans and Democrats, but fringe candidates all across America. I don't think we have to go to public funding to improve the system under which we operate, Ted.
How much did you raise tonight?
I hope we raised about $9 million from a whole lot of people.
I can see why you're sanguine. Thanks. Okay. All right. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Good of both of you to join us.